Good morning everyone. Today we're going to continue looking at prophethood, or Risala as it's known in Islam. In this video we're going to focus on the life of Prophet Muhammad, who's arguably one of the most important prophets. He's the final prophet, hence the name the seal of the prophets. A prophet is essentially a human that has been chosen by God to receive and spread his message. Prophets may often be sent to try and correct the behaviour of society or fix corruption. These people are called to the vocation of prophethood, or Risala as it's known in Islam. The wisdom these people have has been given by Allah, but each prophet has taught the same fundamental message, that there is only one God that needs to be worshipped and that individuals will be judged in the afterlife. The Quran though makes it clear that these individuals only come with Allah's permission. It says, "And it was not for a messenger to come with a sign except by permission of God." Islam teaches that there are 25 prophets identified in the Quran that date back from the creation of the world with Prophet Adam. Many of these prophets are shared with other monotheistic religions such as Christianity and Judaism, although they may have different names and associated beliefs. According to Islam, the problem with the teachings of these previous prophets is that over time their message has either been lost or corrupted by mankind. This is why Allah needed to send one final prophet to give the perfect revelation, the Quran. Muslims believe that throughout every nation and time period, Allah has sent a prophet so that everyone has had the opportunity to hear his message. In the Quran it says, "And for every nation is a messenger." Now, although there are 25 prophets, you only need to know about 4 for this exam. The first, Adam, Ibrahim, Isa, or Jesus as he's known in Christianity, and the final prophet, Prophet Muhammad, who's also known as the seal of the prophets because he's sealing in the teachings. Muhammad then is the final prophet and arguably the most important prophet in Islam. He was born in Mecca in 1570 CE, but became an orphan at the age of 6. Growing up, he had a reputation for being honest, intelligent and hard-working, working as a shepherd for his uncle. The account of his life presents him as an ordinary, humble human. Unlike Isa, he didn't perform any miracles, but he was simply a perfect human role model. In many ways, the fact that he was a human that didn't perform miracles makes him a more relatable role model for society today. In his 20s, he worked for a wealthy female seller known as Khadija. He was so impressed with her honesty and moral character that he proposed. They married and had 4 daughters and 2 sons. At the time, Mecca was filled with corruption. Muhammad became increasingly concerned by the injustices and cruelty he was witnessing in Mecca. This included the worship of multiple idols.
Back in the day, Mecca was a lawless place. The only way to be safe was to have backup. Lots of rich big brothers who'd beat up anyone who got in your way. So the place was ruled by the most powerful families who could do pretty much what they wanted. And religion didn't help. By this time, the Kaaba had been filled to overflowing with 360 idols that did nothing to help anyone. So it was a tough place to grow up if, like Muhammad, you were a poor orphan and believed in just one God you couldn't see, like the Jews and the Christians. He called him Allah, the God, in Arabic there. Muhammad's dad died before he was even born, and his mum died when he was just 6. So he was brought up by his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, and then, when he died too, by his uncle, Abu Talib, who had the respect of the city's ruling families, so Muhammad was safe for the time being. Muhammad started out as a shepherd and then became a businessman, travelling about buying and selling stuff for rich clients. When he did some work for a rich widow called Khadija, she was so impressed by his honesty and skill that they ended up getting married, and for a while it looked like Muhammad was going places. Well, he was, but not how you think. Every year in the month of Ramadan, different calendar, different names for the months, there was a big party around the Kaaba when people made sacrifices to the idols. Muhammad hated it, so he'd get out of town and sleep in a cave he'd found on top of a nearby mountain. One night, Muhammad's praying to Allah when wham! There's the angel Jibreel, you might say Gabriel, standing right in front of him. "Read," says the angel, but Muhammad couldn't read. No schools, you see. Jibreel keeps on at him. 3 times he says, "Read." Then he grabs hold of Muhammad and wham! Again, it's like Muhammad's learnt the words off by heart. So he recites the message out loud. "Read in the name of your Lord, who created man from a drop of blood. Read, for your Lord is most generous. He who taught by the pen, taught man what he did not know." It was a message from Allah. God was speaking to him just like he'd spoken to the prophets in the Jewish and Christian holy books, which meant he was a prophet too. The messages continued for the rest of Muhammad's life. Allah gave him the words to say and the Prophet recited them. The words were written down by his friends, and years later they were collected together and became the Muslim holy book, the Quran, which means recitation, because Muhammad recited it, you see? Anyway, that was much later, so back to the night of power. Muhammad tells his family, then his friends, and eventually everyone about Allah, that he's the one and only God, that he wants everyone to be treated fairly, and long story short, it didn't go down well with the ruling families of Mecca, who liked things just the way they were, thank you very much. And the ruling families didn't want anyone obeying anyone else but them. So the people who believed in Muhammad's message, the Muslims, were given a hard time. Some were even tortured and killed. A few of them managed to escape to Abyssinia, Ethiopia. But most were stuck in Mecca. Muhammad also had to cope with the death of his wife, and then just a few weeks later, his uncle too. Feeling very down, he went to the Kaaba to pray to Allah one night. Then, the weirdest thing happened. Jibreel turns up, sits him on a winged horse called Al-Buraq and flies him all the way from Mecca to Jerusalem. He prays with all the prophets who have ever lived. Then, he's taken up to the heavens to chat with some of the prophets, and then into paradise itself, where Allah tells Muhammad to pray 5 times a day and to stay strong. He's returned to Jerusalem and then flies back to the Kaaba in Mecca. We call it the night journey, and Muslims still argue whether it was a real experience or a vision, but whatever, it gave Muhammad a much needed boost, and just as well, because there were more tough times ahead. So, there was this other city called Yathrib. The people there heard about Muhammad and his message and invited him and his followers to join them. A few at a time, the Muslims left Mecca and made a dangerous journey across the desert to Yathrib. It's known as a hijra, which means migration, you know, like birds do. Muhammad and a few of his friends stayed in Mecca until everyone had got away and then made plans for their own escape. But the ruling families wanted to kill Muhammad while they still could, so 7 sons, one from each family, was sent in the middle of the night to stab the Prophet while he slept. But he was way ahead of them, and when they burst into the house, Muhammad was gone. Trackers were sent out to hunt him down. Muhammad and his best friend Abu Bakr took a roundabout route to try and shake off the pursuit, but the trackers were too good and slowly gained on them. So Muhammad and Abu Bakr hid in a cave and prayed that no one found them. The trackers found the cave all right, but they didn't bother going in to search. There was no way Muhammad could be inside, they thought. There was a spider's web over the mouth of the cave and a nesting bird at the entrance. He must have given them the slip. So off they went, leaving Muhammad and Abu Bakr protected by a spider and a bird. Muhammad made it safely to Yathrib, which was renamed Medina al-Nabi, the city of the Prophet, but most people just call it Medina. But Muhammad's worries weren't over yet. There were 3 big battles between the Muslims and the Meccans. First, the Battle of Badr, when Muhammad and just 313 men faced 1,000 Meccan soldiers. Miraculously, the Muslims won. Then there was the Battle of Uhud, which didn't go so well. Some of Muhammad's men disobeyed his orders and ran off during the battle to raid the Meccans' camp, and so the Muslims were outmaneuvered. Then there was the Battle of the Trench. Medina was protected on 3 sides by mountains, so when the Meccan forces advanced in the city, the Muslims just dug a deep trench. The Meccans made camp, but the weather was terrible. Pouring rain put out their fires and howling winds blew down their tents. Eventually they gave up and went back to Mecca. It was all a bit embarrassing. They were losing the respect of the local tribes who were flocking to join the Muslims. So a peace treaty was signed at Hudaybiyah. But it wasn't long before the Meccans broke it. Muhammad decided that enough was enough. By now he had over 10,000 men, so he led them across the desert to Mecca. The ruling families realized they'd made a huge mistake, but it was too late. All they could do was surrender and hope that the Muslim army killed them quickly. But Muhammad said there should be no more fighting. He rode into Mecca and went straight to the Kaaba. He circled it 7 times anti-clockwise and smashed all the idols, rededicating the Kaaba to Allah. And that's why I'm not going to show you Muhammad. The Muslims wanted to make it totally clear that they only worship the one unseen God. So they didn't have any pictures of Muhammad in case anyone thought he was an idol, and they didn't have any pictures of Allah because he's like nothing on earth, so it would be impossible to draw him anyway.
Prophet Muhammad, like Ibrahim before him, had an innate knowledge that there was only one God, and that if society continued to worship multiple gods, then there would be a day when that one supreme God, Allah, would bring judgment on the world. Muhammad started to spend a long time alone in prayer. During one night known as the Night of Power, or what we now know as Laylat al-Qadr, Muhammad was praying in a cave near Mecca when the angel Jibril appeared before him and ordered him to recite the words that had miraculously appeared before him. After some initial hesitation and reluctance, Muhammad eventually began to recite the revelation he had received. Muslims call this event Laylat al-Qadr, or the Night of Power, and it marks the starting point of when the Quran would be revealed to Muhammad. It's normally remembered on the 27th day of Ramadan and is seen as one of the holiest days in the Muslim calendar. Following this night, the Quran was revealed to Muhammad on numerous different occasions over a 23-year period, finishing at his death. After Muhammad received the first revelation of the Quran, he became convinced that he was a prophet of Allah. 3 years later, he began to preach. The main point of his message was this: there is one true God, Lord of goodness and power. We need to show thanks to God through worship. There will be a judgment day where God will judge our lives. However, many people in Mecca did not take to his teachings particularly well, and he experienced a lot of persecution throughout his life. However, those people that did like Muhammad's message and decided to follow him became known as Muslims. The people of a city known as Yathrib liked the Prophet's message. They were pilgrims and were so impressed with his message that they invited him to join them. Prophet Muhammad started a migration from Mecca to Yathrib. This journey is known as Hijrah, and it now marks the start of the Muslim calendar. On Muhammad's arrival at Yathrib, he was welcomed not only as a prophet but also as a political leader and a military commander. He became their ruler, and as a result the city was renamed to Medina, or City of the Prophet. During the next 10 years, Muhammad worked to unite the different communities there through interfaith dialogue. By 630 CE, Muhammad had gained enough support and started to march back to Mecca with an army of 10,000 men. He conquered Mecca and reclaimed the Kaaba, which had become used for idol worship. Muhammad was then accepted as the final and true prophet of Allah and established Islam as the perfect and permanent religion there. They often called him the seal of the prophets to show that he was the final prophet. Just as you would seal an envelope when you have finished a letter, Muhammad sealed the teachings of Allah, as through him they were complete. Muhammad made this clear in his final sermon, saying, "People, no prophet or messenger will come after me, and no new faith will emerge." Muhammad led the community until his death. Before he died, he gave one final sermon which said, "I leave behind you two things, the Quran and the example of my life. If you follow these, you will not fail." So this raises the question then, are prophets the most useful source of guidance in the lives of Muslims today? Well, many Muslims might agree and argue that prophets are a good source of wisdom and guidance because they come from Allah and arguably meet the needs of the audience at the time. In the Quran it says, "And it was not for a messenger to come with a sign except by permission of God, and that for every nation there is a messenger." As such, these individuals have been sent by Allah to give specific messages that are designed for the people of different nations and different time periods. In addition, many Muslims in contemporary society might argue that prophets, particularly Prophet Muhammad, as a human that didn't perform miracles, are the best source of guidance because they provide relatable examples. As Yusuf Islam said, if we imitate the conduct of the Holy Prophet, we will be successful. Prophet Muhammad in his final sermon even said, "I leave behind you two things, the Quran and the example of my life. If you follow these, you will not fail." As humans, the prophets provide relatable examples that have experienced the same issues that we're likely to go through in our own lives. Finally then, many Muslims might argue that prophets are the best source of wisdom and guidance because they reflect important values of Islam in practice. For example, Muslims learn about the importance of submission and forgiveness by looking at the mistakes of Adam. They can learn about the importance of monotheism, submission, sacrifice and overcoming temptation from Ibrahim. Or they can look about honesty, integrity, overcoming conflict and interfaith dialogue from Prophet Muhammad. Whereas the Quran teaches these values on an academic level, it's arguably much easier to understand when they're demonstrated in the real-life examples of prophets. However, in contrast, many traditional Muslims might argue that the Quran is the ultimate source of wisdom and guidance, as it's the perfect, uncorrupted word of Allah that was given in order to clarify errors in previous sacred texts from earlier prophets. In the Quran it says, "We have sent down to you book as clarification for all things and as guidance and mercy and good tidings for the Muslims." When the Quran was completed, Allah claimed it perfected Islam. As such, the Quran is the absolute fixed word of Allah and provides the ultimate source of wisdom and guidance. In addition, many Muslims might argue that Sharia law could be the most important source of guidance and wisdom, as it helps structure and order the Muslim community and ensure that people continue to follow Allah's word. Hence why Sharia law comes from the term straight path. In 2018, the government conducted a review of the application of Sharia law in England and Wales. and it was argued that these councils shouldn't be banned, saying Sharia councils are fulfilling the needs of some Muslim councils and communities. As such, Muslims could argue that as a legal code, it helps them with the day-to-day practicalities of faith. Finally then, many Muslims, particularly in Western society, might argue that contemporary Islamic leaders may be a better source of guidance because they're trained and can offer insight into how to apply scripture to today's experiences in society. This might be even more useful when trying to practice Islam in places like Wales, where Islam is not the main dominant religion. The Quran says, "And to those whom we have appointed are the people who guide with the truth and thereby do justice." In addition, modern Muslim figures like Yusuf Islam, the singer, or model Halima Aden provide modern examples of practicing Islam within the context of contemporary society. The ways that they spread Allah's message through things like music or the fashion industry can help make Muslim beliefs more relatable to an audience today. These are arguably more useful because their lives and experiences are more relatable than the lives of prophets that lived thousands of years ago. I hope you found that useful. If you want to test yourself on what you've learned about Prophet Muhammad, then have a go at Quizlet or Kahoot. If not, have a go at the practice exam questions on the following slide. Good luck.